energy on everything the city wants to have accomplished. But to use one of Gabe's common things is that, you know, if we do one thing instead of something else, it's literally at the expense of a different project. So we've had a lot of things come up as a planning commission, particularly involving trails, and have occupied a tremendous amount of time, both staff time as well as planning commissioners' time. And so we haven't been able to make the progress that we would like. And one of the things that we discussed as a planning commission a few meetings ago with Trevor is perhaps there's a need for the city to invest more in budgetarily the commitments and the also SHN to be able to do more, right? And talking with Trevor, there is the capacity for them to kind of have some surge capacity internally for projects, but without authorization to bill and do that, they can't just go ahead and do that, right? We have a certain contract for services. So I guess the request from the planning commission is you guys talk about this tonight, is to consider that. If that is important and we want to move these things forward, we're probably going to have to invest some more resources into this because we are currently treading water. And as Richard has been on the commission longer than I, and Cheryl, you were on it before, and a lot of these things have been ongoing for a long time. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of make that comment.
Thank you, Aaron. I guess I would first say thank you to the planning commissioners for all your hard work, and Trevor, of course, as the city planner, very impressed with the report, and I do see a lot of progress. Since I was on the account or the commission 3 years ago, there's been quite a lot of progress made, so that's really good. But I also, as I read through this, kind of had the same, you know, thoughts about the resource constraints and trade-offs that have to be made. And I started kind of looking at, I don't know what the additional resources, like where they could be applied, but it does seem like there's some administrative tasks, for example, that it seems like Trevor's, you know, a highly skilled, you know, individual to be doing some of these things that, you know, she's doing, and that maybe we could parse that out, you know, and have some support that's to kind of get things done. I mean, I just, you know, some of the things I looked at were that the OWTS program, for example, like keeping up with permits and following up on enforcement. There's just some things like that that felt more potentially more administrative. But I'd like to hear from the rest of the council, and you know, please share your thoughts on the question.
That's one, two. Yeah, let me just ask you, Trevor, do you have other staff at SHN that could help you if funding was available?
We do. You know, there have been times where we haven't had the staff. It ebbs and flows, and retaining good people can be tough. But I think we're on an upswing. So I would say yes at this time.
Yeah.
Well, I have a lot of general questions. I don't think we want to stay on the budget.
No, I mean, I think we should circle back to, let's circle back to kind of what's the work that, once we talk about priorities, maybe we can then talk about applying resources to those priorities. Seems like a good flow if that works for everyone. And then let's, yeah, let's get the questions out there.
Well, I'll just jump right in there.
Yeah.
Just wondering, who do you typically deal with at that coastal commission? Excuse me. You know, is that one person, a variety of people?
It depends, and that has fluctuated over the years. Tamara Geddick is the supervising planner that I primarily work with, but now it's Rebecca. So, but Rebecca's been there less than a year. But so they specialize in different cities. So Rebecca would be the analyst that's assigned to Trinidad. And they have had quite a bit of turnover too over the years, but Tamara's been a constant, and Melissa is the head of the office. But it depends. So there's a grant manager that's someone different. There's a statewide planning unit. There's, you know, so they're categorized somewhere.
Okay. I noticed your statement on page 1 of the report that once our LCP is certified by the Coastal Commission, it will be somewhat insulated from changes in the law. Are you speaking of changes to like the Public Resources Code, or would that be housing law?
That's specifically the second unit law, and that could change. Historically, the coastal zone has been excluded from all the housing laws. That is starting to change. But that, because once we have our LCP certified, like currently, I would say we are buffered from the second unit law because our LCP doesn't allow second units for the most part, and that's what we're stuck. But then to try and allow them, we can't just default to the state. They're so complicated, and
Don't we have an ADU ordinance? Isn't that a second unit?
we have a draft ADU ordinance.
Hasn't been approved by the commission?
It has not been approved by and it now has to be approved by the Coastal Commission and Housing Department of Housing.
It'll be part of the LCP.
It will be part of the LCP.
Yeah, thanks. And so on page 2, thought about for people that aren't in compliance. Yes. How many are we talking?
I mean, I think it's only 3 or 4 property owners and, a dozen properties or so. It's primarily one property.
Page 3. Your cultural elements, it says city staff needs to incorporate Rancheria and Euro-Trap's comments on the draft development. Have those comments been made?
Yeah.
So you have them all. Haven't been.
Yeah, we just haven't incorporated them into a new draft.
Is it a situation like the CEQA where when people make comments that have to be responded to somehow, or something different?
No, it's really, this document's a work in progress, so we would make the changes unless it felt like something that might be controversial or, so what I do is, I send them the draft and they send me back comments and I incorporate their comments using track changes and then bring it back to the planning commission to review those changes. And then at some point, formal consultation is required, and that would be formal government consultation between the city council and council.
Right. So then on the new studies, some have been previously drafted, need updating, and some are new studies. What are the new studies?
The new studies for the visitor services study that I mentioned and the build out assessment. So I think those were the new studies. The OPC grant paid for the coastal resiliency plan, and that was one of the studies the Coastal Commission was asking for as well. So those are the new ones. Parking is one that we just need to finalize. That's a new study. And soils and the biological resources are the 2 other ones that.
Has the Coastal Commission been good about providing money for those studies they require, or are we paying for those?
It depends. So this grant, yes, we have gotten grants to pay for those studies, and if we hadn't. But they do have money and they do want to help jurisdictions update their laws. So they are supportive of providing this when they have.
Yeah, then turning to page 4, notice that both the trailer parks are its own visitor service. Wondering, the fact that they de facto become permanent resident parks, does that help us with our low income housing, for at all, or?
I don't think so. It's a really complicated issue and, I think that normally it's the Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD, that oversees RV parks, but because they're in the coastal zone, they're subject to the city's LCP, but I think we didn't really always understand that. And it's not like it's not like they came to the city and said, hey, we're gonna switch to long-term residence. It just evolved. And so now, it's a tough situation because they do provide some low-income housing, but I don't think RVs actually count as housing. So I've been trying to HCD is now formal, and I've reached out to staff, but I need to submit a formal technical assistance request. Get some additional information about how we can deal with that.
Yeah. What about our STR ordinance? Something else here. See. I see, because the visitor service component, don't they play it? Wouldn't they go a long ways towards satisfying that part of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's not necessarily that the RV parks need to be visitor services, and that's part of the purpose of the visitor services study. We don't necessarily have the technical information, like we didn't do a demand assessment, but we did quite a bit of research into what's available in the Trinidad planning area for overnight accommodations, looking at pricing, looking at occupancy rates. And so, I think it shows that there are plenty of visitor serving facilities in the area. So maybe the RV parks don't need to be visitor services, but we still need to sort of figure out, one's for sale right now. One does have some, they do some overnight rental. So it might be something where maybe we just change the wording of the zoning and allow a mix of both. Part of it is I'm trying to get in touch with the owners to see what they want.
I understand you're right that all of the LCP is part of the general plan, but the general plan has more than the LCP.
Yeah, a lot of communities will have a separate coastal general plan and an inland general plan. Because Trinidad's almost entirely in the coastal zone, that doesn't make sense. But there are elements that don't address coastal resource issues. Right. And so those are outside of that CP. And even within individual elements, we have policies that we identify as not being prioritized because they're not coastal resource.
I don't mean to dominate all the time here, just one more. About the new Yurok Indian Housing Authority. Where we do the initial CEQA document on that.
So they drafted it, and that's what I was working on today. Actually, I was going through and editing it, and hoping to get it published at the end of this week or early next week.
So is it going to be categorically exempt?
No, it'll be mitigated negative.
That covers it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Bryce. Katie, Carrie, do you have a question?
I have a brief question. You mentioned 5 houses.
Can you please speak into the microphone? Thank you.
You mentioned 5 houses that were to be developed. Where was that? I missed that.
So there's one property that kind of, it's between 101 and West Haven Drive, sort of southeast of Hidden Creek RV Park. And it's a 3-acre parcel, Parker Creek runs through it, so houses are gonna be developed on the southern part. And the riparian area is gonna stay open space.
Is it across the road from the existing trailer park or on the same side?
On the same side.
Got one more question about the AOT. Talk about a partial opening of it. People going to be able to get to the beach? What, partway down the trail and you have to turn around and go back?
Seems
They're
like
not gonna like
that's-
that.
Seems,
Tourists are not gonna
I know,
like that.
it seems like that's our only path forward at this point. I'm sure that will.
So is that, and Hidden Creek is on septic, is that correct? Yeah, so is this property requesting water hookup?
Yes, they will be getting city water.
On
It's in
city
city
water,
limits, yeah. And then on-site septic system.
Okay. Katie, did you have more questions about that? Okay, Carrie, do you have anything?
I mean, I guess I'm just curious about enforcement, like, why is it so challenging to even get a hold of these property owners, and why can't they respond to your requests, and what recourses do we have to support you to get the information that you need?
It's, you know, you can, so I think we do have a pretty good nuisance abatement ordinance. And, you know, a lot of times you can get compliance with just writing the courtesy letter, or maybe a second courtesy letter. That will usually get you compliance for most issues. But beyond that, I mean, you can start issuing fines, you can get court orders, but that's gonna take city attorney time.
I have some kind of minor questions that I think have kind of been answered through the Q&A, and I guess just to up level a little bit from that, I was thinking more about the resources and applying resources for getting work done. And one other thing that occurred to me is all of this work should all of it sit with the planning commission. So for example, I was toying with the idea that under future agenda items, for example, as we talk about annexation, is annexation something that the planning commission should take on because it's land use? Or is it something that the city council should take on? Or is it some sort of a hybrid approach, for example? So I'm looking at like some of these. The other one I was curious about was land acknowledgement, for example. We might be able to take that off your plate. There was a land acknowledgement that was considered as part of the coastal resiliency program. It's already been drafted. And, we could consider that as a council in a future agenda, perhaps I think right now we're booked up through almost the fall, but, if we could do it before that, great, but it would be out of ways. And so there's some things like that maybe you guys can, delegate up to the council to get some help. So I would like to mention that as well, in addition to the idea of more resources. So I think most of my questions are kind of minor, so I'd like to kind of hear from the commissioners if there's anything you guys want to add to this discussion. Before I go to comment.
I'll say a few things.
Please.
I'll just resonate with what's already been said before. But Trevor's a one-person band, and thank you very much for years and years of service. It's been a long time. But it's really appreciated. And I think one of the things that we, at least I personally appreciate, and I know that you don't get to see very often, but sometimes some of the issues that we deal with can get somewhat contentious. And Trevor is very, very good at maintaining a professional attitude, which is extremely admirable. And thank you very much for that. That's always very important. While I have your attention, I would like to also just bring up, it's not necessarily a planning commission issue, but Trevor piqued my interest and and I remembered it today, and that is that the city has a Trinidad Emergency Operations Plan. And if you haven't talked about it already, it is way out of date. And this is something I think is extremely important in the realm that we're in right now with sea level rise, climate change, this all kinds of issues that need to be dealt with. And this operations plan was last looked at in 2014. So it is way out of bed. And I think it's extremely important. And just put out there that everybody who might be interested or be working on this, that we put a lot of emphasis on that, because I think that's very important. And then one last comment, and this is just for clarification, Trevor, just so everybody understands, the request for water service outside the city limits, people might look at that and say, well, why are we doing that? But it's because I believe that those residents are within the service area, and so it is possible that they could be connected. But I just want to make sure that was clarification out there for the public.
Yeah, and just a little bit more history on that, because I think we have an annexation discussion presentation coming up. But in 2001, the LAFCO laws changed to make it harder to hook up outside your own boundaries. And so the city has not hooked up anybody since 2001, except for, I think, a couple of people who had already had meters or contracts. And then, and Humboldt LAFCO was particularly strict in how they interpreted that law. They relaxed it a few years ago to make annexation more of, okay, you can hook up, but you have to agree to annex in the future. And so, and then when the Rancheria had their hotel request, we looked at water a lot, and we developed policies for hooking up water outside city limits. So yeah, these guys are on Mill Creek Lane, so right outside the city, within the city sphere of influence. You know, I thought we could just go through that process, but LAFCO is requiring that we look at the feasibility of annexation as part of those applications. So I think the city should consider annexation. I think Trinidad, at the size it is now, it's going to be difficult. I mean, as you can see, dealing with all these various state laws, and here be difficult, and so, you know, I would encourage the city to consider annexation for a variety of reasons. It's you know, annexing residential areas is not going to be you know, a monetary benefit to the city. There's land use control, population, those sorts of things. Areas has more benefit potential for that to the north.
Question, the water line on Mill Creek already goes to the end of the road, doesn't it?
That's right. Although it crosses actually from Berry Road over to Mill Creek. It's a weird little connection over there. And there are some water pressure. It's the area of the system that there's some low water pressure. So we've asked GHD to run the city's water system model to look at hooking up those properties. So most people are already connected.
Right, and we say that LAFCO wants us to consider annexation, you mean of the whole street?
Yes, I mean, at least of the properties, but it would make sense to look at the whole street. Because you don't want to just annex the little.
Right.
Yeah.
Islands.
Yeah.
We're going to be hearing more about that in LAFCO this evening.
Yeah.
And to Cheryl's comment, and we'll have a better idea really whose bailiwick that comes under, plan commission or city council.
Yeah, I think that would be a good discussion to have. If we don't get to it in the annexation discussion tonight, then we can talk about it in future meetings. But Let me take a pause here and see if there are any public comments while we have a few minutes, and then we'll come back and kind of summarize. Zach, I see you've come off mute. Would you like to say anything?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Zach Weiner. I'm a local business owner. I own the Emerald Forest Cabins and RV and the Trinidad Extended Stay RV Park off of just up the road from me there off Patrick Point Drive.
Yes, thank you for joining us.
I'm sorry?
I said, yes, we know those properties well. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, and part of the reason I'm joining is because of the LAFCO annexation discussion, and annexation is something that we have not applied for, but we're very interested in for a multitude of reasons. Water ultimately would be one of them, but we do pose to add a monetary gain to the city through TOT taxes, and we produce quite a bit of TOT tax. So I think there could be a huge benefit for the city there. We also have water rights. And we are currently working with the state of California for grants to upgrade our existing water plants that I think in collaboration would be much better to have that funding go to the city to, produce better results for your plant upgrades. So there's a multitude of things that we're already working with that we would love to work with the city. Our taxes go to the, to the county of Humboldt. We don't know what happens to them. We'd rather support the community of Trinidad and see it grow and be successful. So I think it's a multi-beneficial thing. And I can speak more on that after LAFCO. I also heard a few comments and I want to get some clarification. It was a little hard to hear, but there were some questions about RV park use in the area, whether it's low-income housing or nightly. I'm just curious, what are the city's goals? What does the city need, or what do they want with RV parks? Are they looking for more affordable housing long-term? Are they looking for more nightly?
I think, well, that's one of the things we're trying to look at. Certainly the state is telling the city that it needs more affordable housing. But what form that takes, we don't know. But visitor services is a priority use under the Coastal Act. So the Coastal Commission requires that we show that there's enough visitor serving facilities in the Trinidad area. So that's what we're looking at with our visitor services study.
Okay. Well, we offer both, kind of what we call midterm to long term, and then also nightly, short-term type of accommodations, but, definitely willing to talk with the city if there's anything we can do to help infill or help you with any of those requirements. We're already doing it. So if there's something we can work with the city on, that would be great.
All right, let me take you up on that. Thank you very much. And as you mentioned, we will be talking some more about this too in the LAFCO presentation. So,
yeah, fantastic. And I spoke with Gabriel Adams earlier today. He's got my contact information, email and phone number. So feel free to share that information if any of you want to talk. And yeah, definitely, curious to see what LAFCO says. And it sounds like another meeting. I don't know if it's with city council or the mayor or what it is to, look at these other things directly between us and the city, maybe at a later date.
Yeah, tonight at the city council meeting at 6, and shortly after the kind of regular agenda, LAFCO is going to do more of an educational presentation. So I don't know that we'll get into too many specifics about different options, but certainly in the planning commission in the past, we've had discussions about annexation just in the water service area. Annexation, there's actually a presentation that shows sort of like an A, B, and C kind of different options. And my hunch is that once we've had the educational discussion, then we'll look at that kind of presentation and determine whether we want to go any further with any of those options. But tonight, it's getting everybody up to speed on what annexation is and what LAFCO's role is in that. So thank you, Zach, and I'm glad we have your contact information because that'll be helpful as we go along through this process.
Yeah, nice to meet you all. I wish I could have been there, but I had some other pressing things. I'm in another state, but anyways. I'll be in touch. I will be there next week if it makes sense for me to stop by at all or, you know,
Right.
Yeah.
Terrific. Thank you.
thank you.
Other items from the floor, please, or excuse me, public comments.
Yeah, Thompson, I had a question about the Axel Lindgren Trail. I'm just, I'm trying to I watch the planning commission videos and also city council, so I'm trying to pay attention to what's going on with the trails and appreciate all the reports, you know, in the supplemental. Do we have to wait until we get a grant? I'm concerned about the political climate before we finish the Axel Lindgren Trail. I mean, I'm concerned about years and years of.
So, you know, I think we are looking at both short and long-term projects and trying to, you know, do something small that the city can fund in the short term to get it open. And then the long term would be looking for grant funding for, you know, the larger trail project that was
Angie's working on that. So do we have like an estimated time, like in a year or 2 years to finish it or anything? I mean, I'm not trying to say.
No, I mean,
We're
we're working on a grant application now for that long term. In terms of the short term, you know, I don't know, we were hoping to have it this summer and it's like, that's not gonna happen. And so we have to look at some other options. Yes, yeah, some of it's political, some of it's just geological.
So hopefully, yeah, it's not, I'm sure it's not an easy task for sure project. So hopefully by next summer, we can have it open.
Yes, I hope so.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Any other comments, public comments? Okay, then I'm gonna bring it back to the council. One of the staff recommendations is to provide input on the projects and their prioritization and to suggest other potential projects. I think right now, I feel like there are enough projects on the plate. On your plate, I do think that from a prioritization standpoint, I'll throw out some things that I think are priorities, and I'd love to hear from the other counselors if they agree, but obviously getting the general plan done, which we've, you know, made really good progress. I love the cultural elements and there's two kind of optional elements, and while both of them are very important, if we can get the non-optional done first, that seems like a priority to me. And OWTS, I feel like could be more program oriented and therefore maybe be taken off Trevor's plate to a large extent if we can hand that off to a program manager or some program or administrative resources potentially. I'm just throwing that out because I don't have a ton of detail. I think the council needs to continue to be really involved on trails and that we need to be kind of held accountable for that based on the history over the last couple of years. So I would put that, you know, on our plate as much as possible. And as we just discussed annexation, I think is TBD. Like we need to talk about what's the scope of it and then determine where that should sit so that we don't add more to the commission's plate. Let me just see if there's anything else. I mean, enforcement is really the city manager and the city council. So that's also us. I don't know if that helps, but I think that's kind of where my head is at. Other counselors, any thoughts or comments?
Yeah, my thought is that it's kind of, you know, getting, for example, if we were able to get more staff from SHN working along with Trevor,
Yes.
it's kind of a good news, bad news scenario in that the good news is that get more things done faster. The bad news is the money runs out faster. So ideally, we would want to optimize, you know, some kind of assistance to you that gives us the most return on our investment. Whether that be a city staff person, like Angela, for example, or somebody on SHN staff.
Yeah, and I was going to mention that we're going to have our budget discussion in May. So next month, the city city council will discuss budget. And then also, it sounds like there may be some grant funding that we could look at to add more resources. So maybe it's a combination of budget discussion and grant funding. And then to Bryce's point, is that, you know, existing staff or new staff when we hire, I don't know if our plan is still to hire a new program manager. Is it? Okay, so yeah, so that program manager, in the past, Jennifer Hakenen had that role, and I know she did a lot on the septic work, you know, the OWTS. So that could be helpful there. I just want to mention the EOP, the Emergency Ops Plan that Richard Johnson mentioned. The city manager and I have been approaching, and especially, I guess, I would say Joe has, the city manager, the OES team, to try to get them to help us revise that plan as a first pass. So we're trying to get some outside resources to help us with that. It's a big job. It's an over 200-page plan right now. So nothing to report at this point. We're just working on it. But I think between the council, the planning commission, and also the community emergency response team, sir, we can, and the city manager and staff, we can, you know, tackle that one over the next year or so. So I agree with you, Richard. It's way out of date. Anything else to add, councilors or commissioners?
I just have a question. Where does the ADU ordinance fall under your priorities? Because in the relatively short time we've been dealing with it as a planning commission, as Trevor alluded to, the state's requirements and rules change, and we have missed opportunities to secure things the way they were, and now are beholden to new regulations. You know, specifically the height is one of the biggest misses that we had, maximum structure height, because we couldn't get it done soon enough. We're now beholden to a new set of rules, which is what it is. But if that's a priority to try and get that option out here for affordable housing and to do that, we'd like to hear that from you, where that kind of falls, or at least I would. The other kind of just statement I'd make on grant funding is phenomenal, and I'm a huge fan of it. However, there have been times when we have had to prioritize things because of expiration dates of grant funding ahead of a different project, right? If we don't finish something by a certain date, we're going to lose that money. And so again, we're trading one for the other. And so I just wanted to make that awareness out there. And sometimes it might be worth it, sometimes it might not, but that has been, I've felt a challenge from the planning commission standpoint several times during my tenure. So.
It's a double-edged sword. On the ADUs, I guess I had in the past thought that it wasn't a huge priority for the city because we don't have a lot of, you know, build out capabilities. There's not a lot of space to create ADUs, and it's also fraught with, you know, sometimes disagreements about where ADUs should be and whether they should be in, you know, allowed at all and so forth. However, my understanding is that the state, you know, laws kind of pushed us to develop the ADU ordinance and to proceed with it. So that's why it became a higher priority. Otherwise, for me, I don't think it would be as high a priority. But, you know, what do you think, Trevor?
I mean, I think that housing affordability in Trinidad is an issue. And I know there are interests from people in having ADUs. I think, you know, dealing with septic is, you know, a huge limiting factor, and I don't see a lot of potential for new construction ADUs. I think it's more potential for converting existing structures, whether it's accessory structures or carving out part of existing. Is probably the biggest potential, but you know what? Like one of the things that worries me is you can add on an ADU, so you can put a second story ADU on, and so with the ADU laws, you have to approve them ministerially. It can't be a public review. There can't be any discretion. And so if they meet the requirements, and so you can add a second story, 20-foot tall ADU, no review. And that, I just don't think that's going to work.
What up against is if you add another closet, essentially, then your septic system has to.
Well, no. And so bedrooms, Well, it depends on how you define bedroom. Building code does not require a closet per bedroom. The building code definition is very, very broad. And so I think we need our own definition of bedroom, but we have, you know, in Trinidad, because of septic limitations, we have a lot of large houses that have not very many bedrooms. And so, you know, I think that's a concern in terms of, you know, county offices and dens can be converted to bedrooms. But how many more people is it really? You know, it's a tough issue, and the county has recently relaxed their standards for requiring what they require for septic systems for ADUs. And I think we need, I think before their interpretation was too strict, now I think it's a little too loose, and I think we need something.
Let me ask you this, Trevor. It seems to me that we have the authority as a general law city to pass ordinances, you know, for our health, safety, and welfare. And for example, and we can do that without getting approval by the Coastal Commission, but it doesn't count towards their requirement. They can require us to do an LCP, which may or may not include ADU section. We have our own authority to, you know, authorize or regulate ADUs, and we could start doing that, it seems to me, even before the Coastal Commission certifies our LCP. Could we, or?
I think not, because in general, creating an ADU requires a coastal development permit. That would be development under the coastal act, so it would fall under the purview of the coastal act. But I think that, like I said, I'm sort of switching how I might try and tackle this, and it might be a health and safety issue, kind of, because cities are allowed to carve out areas where they allow ADUs and where they don't. And I think Trinidad would be an area, if it were larger, you would carve out Trinidad as not really allowing ADUs or only in specific situations. So I think trying to use that in terms of coastal resource issues, aesthetics, views, parking, septic, water, all those things, I think we can maybe use that to say, you know, we can't just allow ADUs anywhere in the city without discretionary.
All right, we're getting close to the top of the hour. I guess I want to reflect really quick back to the commissioners. Do you think ADUs are a high priority, number one, and then number two, any other quick things you want to add?
I think ADUs are a priority. It's certainly something that we've focused on. And as Trevor just outlined, there's a lot of challenges in Trinidad when it comes to ADUs, but there's a lot of pressure from the state, you know, to make something happen there. Regard to other things, the only other comment I guess I wanted to add, or maybe it's more of a question for the council, was I guess ties back to the trail subject. I appreciate you guys trying to take a more active role on that. I think that's more of it's sort of become more of a political issue than it has a land use issue in a lot of ways. And in that vein, the outgoing city councilors, two of them were assigned to government contact with local tribes, but they're now gone, and I don't want that to just fall flat, because I think moving forward we're going to need to continue that contact with that government to government setting. So I want to spur you to keep that alive, because it's going to be an issue that's going to
Yeah, and the council will vote 2 representatives for government to government, and that rotates to some degree. We have some consistency, but we definitely will continue to have those meetings. So thanks for that. And I did capture that there was a request to do that related to have a GUG UR5 and maybe to the Glendo Trail for, and I'm sure the rancheria would like to discuss that as well. Okay, I am mindful. Do you want to add something, Richard?
I was just gonna say this on a regular basis.
Yes, yes. It's been really interesting. I want to thank everyone. I love I'd say thank you for all your hard work on the planning commission. I really respect what you do. I respect what Trevor does and all the hard work. And hopefully this has been helpful. We'll continue to discuss it and yeah, have future meetings. So thanks everyone. And we're going to shift gears here in about a minute and a half to the city council meeting. Thank you. Adjourned.
Recording stopped.
See that again. Oh, by the way, good. I do.
Nice. Oh, shit. Oh.
Recording in progress.
Yeah, I think we're ready for our next meeting, which is our regularly scheduled city council meeting. This is Tuesday, April 8th, 2025. And we have no closed session tonight, so I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order, and we'll begin with a pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll start with approval of tonight's agenda. Councilors, are there any questions or comments about tonight's agenda? Any changes to the agenda? I need to ask for public comments.
Okay, so
Really quick, and we will do that. Thank you. Are there any public comments regarding tonight's agenda? Any changes that public members of the community would like to suggest? All right, back to the council. All right.
approval of the agenda.
There, second. Katie, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So moved. Next, we have approval of the minutes from March 11th, 2025. Are there any questions or changes on the minutes?
I have just a comment, if I may.
Yeah, can you please use them?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we're gonna
I
have
just
to
want to
share them tonight.
thank you, Jade, for the minutes. That's a hard job trying to capture these lengthy meetings and keep it cogent and short and to the point. I really appreciate it.
Right, are there any public comments or questions regarding the March 11th minutes? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council for a motion. I'll move to approve the minutes for March 11th. Is there a second? Katie, I think your hand will go up first, and then all those in favor. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, it passes unanimously. The minutes are approved and recorded. So next we have council reports and committee assignments. Would anyone like to volunteer to go first?
I'll go first.
All right.
I represent the city on the HCOG commission, and at the last meeting, we hired a new executive director, a gentleman by the name of Brendan Bird. That's all I have to report this evening.
Thank you, Bryce. Hey, I guess we'll just move this direction. Okay. How about you, Carrie?
I was 5 minutes late to a meeting and I'm still getting the acronym right. I think it's the Redwood Economic
Oh,
Commission. And although I didn't, so I will get an update for you guys.
okay, thank you. I just have a quick one, and it's actually about LAFCO. So I attended the March 19th LAFCO meeting. It was a mid-year budget review and also a review of the Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District service review, the MSR municipal service review, and their sphere of influence update, which is updated. That's updated about every 5 years, so it's significant to spend time on it. We had 2 meetings on it. There were just a few general questions about some of the rates and various numbers, miscellaneous things, and infrastructure upgrades. And relative to the greater Trinidad area, the discussion that was most interesting centered on a request from Supervisor Madrone. And he was asking for LAFCO to provide data relating to the Rancheria's new hotel project and their planned hookup to Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District. He was asking for data related to that to be developed, especially related to any development impact that the project might have. But staff recommended holding off on doing studies because that connection decision has not been solidified, it's not been approved at this point. So it would be, they felt that it would be a use of staff resources ahead of a project that's really actually is approved to go forward. And then my opinion that I had in the meeting was that additional stakeholders would also need to be there because, you know, to scope a project, a data capturing project like that, where we're going to go out and do an analysis. I felt that we needed to scope that analysis, and that to do that, we would also need other parties at the table, including the Rancheria, who I felt would want to be there and be part of that scoping exercise, as well as, you know, the city of Trinidad. So I felt that the city council here would want to know that that was going to take place and would want to weigh in on perhaps what data is collected. So the board did agree to accept the MSR and the SOI with the understanding, though, that the Rancheria's connection to Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District would be brought back to the board, pardon me, I believe before a final decision. So that did get accepted and filed, the SOI, but with the understanding that we could have a discussion at future board meetings. And that is it for me. Let me just ask if there are any counselors who have questions about anything that was just presented. Okay, are there any public comments or questions about what we just talked about? All right, seeing none, I think we would, oh, please. Would you mind coming to the podium, please, for the folks online?
Oh,
Thank you.
I noticed that you mentioned LAFCO and in that, and I'm a resident of Mill Creek, and we've applied for a water connection. And I didn't know if that is going to be readdressed later in the meeting or not, about the annexation of the whole neighborhood, the annexation of the two people interested in hookups.
That's a really good question. So we are going to have LAFCO present. It's going to be coming up in our agenda in a few minutes.
Okay.
And we're going to have them present, and then we will do some Q&A. I don't know if we'll make, well, no, I do know that we will not be making any decisions tonight about annexation. It's more educational, but it is laying the groundwork for that. And we did talk a little bit about it in our last meeting with the Planning Commission, specifically about the water request that you've made for your, So we did talk about, we didn't make any decisions, but the council is now aware, and if they hadn't already been, so.
Okay.
Yeah, so we can talk about it some more. Thank you. Any questions or comments about the committee reports? Any others? Okay. All right, well, great. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our city manager to give the staff report.
Thank you very much, Mayor, members of the council. Tonight for this, my staff report, we have a CSA 4 meeting that was rescheduled from late March to this week. It's going to discuss all things fire-related services, volunteer fire, CAL FIRE. We're going to try to help determine a feasibility study, develop a scope of work, and then send that study out, see if we can get some quotes, and then when that comes back, try to determine if it's something we want to move forward with. So we will have more information on the CSA 4 meeting after this week's meeting. So an update maybe next month or certainly by June. Water update for those of you who are interested. Coleman Sandville Engineering is now finally off of the books as of March 18th. February costs, which we didn't have at the last meeting, were $12,400, and the final March invoice through March 18th was $6,932. Our new interim CPO, Eric Sanders, came on board March 19th. March 19th to the 31st was a $1,734 invoice. So that gentleman is $4,000 a month, all inclusive, so all, whether he comes out at least once a month, all the reports, all included in that now $4,000 contract, so I think we're in a better spot going forward. I would like to announce that Kyle Shipman took the T2 exam and passed, so we have yet another T2 on the bench, building contact hours in advance of trying for the T3 exam. We have one gentleman approaching his 1,000 contact hours and trying to get a test date for his T3. So hopefully, fingers crossed, in the next several months, we will have a T3 in-house that will be able to operate as a CPO and provide the necessary requirements that we need for them to not, so we won't need the interim going forward. West Haven Intertie project is moving forward. We see the long anticipated plan specs and engineering, updated project costs to complete from the West Haven Water District. We're reviewing that information, and we hope to be out to bid. I was thinking by mid-April, but I think we want to be out to bid by mid-May at the latest, so we can take advantage of construction season and midsummer construction start sometime in late July or early August. A bid document is being prepared for the windows and rock repair. We've had a couple of folks come by already to give us a bid, so we're looking forward to seeing what those costs are and getting the window and rock repair project underway. We are working on the FY 25-26 budget, which is scheduled for our May 13th meeting. So trying to get those details nailed down and get something that we can get to the council and have a discussion about our budget for the next fiscal year. We are continuing emergency operation plan discussions with county OES. Earlier in the planning commission meeting was brought up that our last EOP was 2014. I think it's important to note that that document was created with help from county OES during an effort when they were standing up what was called the NEMS and SEMS program, which helps us operate under emergency conditions. I reminded the county of that, so they are looking for resources to help us update the current EOP. There's for sure a few changes in the regulations that require update. So they have reviewed ours and agree that it probably needs a little bit of an update. And we're looking forward to that help. The Edward Sign Street update, I finally found an engineer who's thinks that he can find a solution to help remove the signs. Still waiting for him to return the contract. So the good news is we found an engineer. The really difficult news is he hasn't yet returned the contract, so I'm hoping that we get that back from him pretty quick, and hopefully in the next month or so we'll have a set of plans, specs, and engineering for you all to review and approve to remove the signs from Edward Street. I'm happy to answer questions if you have.
Any questions from the council for Joe? Bryce.
Joe, where are we with the demonstration pickleball match?
Well, thank you. I meant to update that too. We had laid some tape down. Unfortunately, the weather played havoc on that pre-market surface. So we're going to reline that out here now that we have some sunny weather out in front of us. And we're shaking his head. We have a net on order, 28, I think it costs about $25 for the net. So it's not a big expense. And once we get that restriped and we get the net in place, it's ready for pickleball to be played. So I would say within the next week or so, we should be able to, if those of you who want to play pickleball, come on out and give it a try.
Joe, and when they do come out and give it a try, is that when there's going to be a noise study done?
Yeah, we will, yes, we do have a sound meter in the office. Yes, we will take sound measurements. And
As I recall, we kind of tabled the item until there was, some council members that wanted to hear what it actually sounds like. And so the neighbors can hear also before we actually approve it. That's why the tape instead of burning striking.
yes, there are a few neighbors who are actively engaged in conversations about the pickleball court and are interested in when it's going to be coming online, and then they will give us feedback, I'm sure, based on prior conversations with them.
And then come before.
And then we will come back to council with a more complete report and some empirical measurements for noise.
Are there any questions from the public regarding the staff report? Okay, sorry. Okay, please come up to the mic if you don't mind, just so we can hear you online. Thank you.
Jeff Barry, I live in Edwards. I was simply going to say, I was talking with a friend of mine 2 days ago who's really, really into pickleball. He does not live around here. He's tournament qualified and all that stuff. And he says this is a very big issue in many neighborhoods where they have it. And it's, people like it, people don't like it. He told me you can get special balls that have lower loudness, lower decibels, especially for areas that are close to residents. So I'm not sure if you guys know about that, or can you get some for the test?
We can do that. The problem is enforcement. We're only here.
That's
another challenge with pickleball is everyone thinks they're going on the pro tour.
You're right, and there's also, I think we heard that there were special paddles too, but we're not sure. Or maybe you can use them together, and then it's absolute silence. Okay. Let's see. Oh, I wanted to ask if the Lieutenant McCall he's not on tonight.
He's not here.
Okay.
The report is in your.
Okay, thank you. So that's in the packet for those who want to review that. And then, Joe, I know Trevor was going to give us some input. Was that part of the staff report, or is that?
That is a staff report. That's correct. Yeah, that's on your fire severity agenda item there.
Okay. Would you like to go ahead and?
Oh, well, that's on your agenda, although I will say.
Oh, it's on the agenda. Okay, which item is it? I apologize.
Item 5.
It's number 5, and you consider moving it up back to.
Okay. All right, so what I will do then is, when we approved the agenda, we probably should have approved the agenda with that change. So I'm going to take us back to that really quick, because what we'll need to do then is, council, is to, if you agree, is to move item 5 to item 1.
Can we make it out of the last presentation there?
Yes, so we will move it to item 2.
Thank you.
Move item 5 to item 2. And then continue with the agenda as so. And let me ask, are there any members of the public who have an issue with that change to the agenda? All right, back to the council for, I will go ahead and do this since I started this. I would move to change the agenda to move item 5 to number 2. Otherwise, the agenda will stay as stands. As it stands.
I second.
Carrie seconds. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you for letting me do that bit of administration. And with that, we have completed staff reports, so we're going to go to items from the floor. At this time, members of the public may comment on items not appearing on tonight's agenda. Individual comments will be limited to around 3 minutes or less. Please direct your comments to the council as a whole, maintain decorum, and avoid personal attacks on staff, members of the council, and/or other members of the public. Council and staff responses will be minimal for non-agenda items. So with that, are there any items from the floor? Mr. Hagener. And also, if everybody wouldn't mind, I know some of you have been great about this, giving your name and where you reside, if you're comfortable doing so.
Aaron Haken, residing in the city limits of Trinidad. I'll keep these 2 items brief. One, thank you to city staff for continuing to use and make people aware of the new messaging technology that we got with our new website, the email notification system, the text messaging. That's one of the big things that we got out of that system, so I'm pleased that we're using it. The second is something I've brought up repeatedly since we came out of COVID and began having hybrid meetings, and that is the audio video quality of the services we are providing, both the city staff to look and redo minutes after the fact, the public participating. We had a gentleman earlier, I guess this is a comment both as a constituent of yours and as a member of the planning commission. This was great for what it was designed for, which was amplification in the room. We've long gone some technology to allow video conferencing. The city needs to take the next step, and it's not a huge financial lift. There are systems out there. I've offered in the past to help with this, but if you've never made the time to go and watch a recording after the fact, I encourage you to do that. You will find the audio quality does not provide opportunities for participation from the public. It does not provide opportunities for remote participation by planning commission members, city councilors in a capacity that makes, the government accessible. So you need to take the next step. That's your role. That's your obligation to the public. There's a lot of systems out there that are standalone that do both video things, that will automatically track people in the room. That's called the owl. You can set those up. Please, I'm imploring you, begging you, whatever else, and I'm going to repeat this to you ad nauseum until progress is made. We thought it was a bandwidth issue. That itch was scratched. It is not a bandwidth issue. Let's do more. Thanks.
Thank you. Other items from the floor? Okay, I see no more, so we were going to move on to tonight's consent agenda. Council, any questions about tonight's consent agenda or any changes? All right, any public comments regarding the consent agenda? Back to the council for a motion.
I move approval of the consent agenda.
Oh, it was a tie that time. I'll give this one to Carrie.
I second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so as we mentioned earlier, the agenda is going to move forward with item 1 as our item, and that's a discussion presentation of the Humboldt County Local Agency Formation Committee, which is what LAFCO stands for. And this will be regarding a presentation regarding LAFCO's role and functions regarding the annexation process. And so I'm delighted to introduce the executive officer, Colette, and she will come and take us through this.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor Kelly and council and staff. Really appreciate the opportunity and everybody. So yeah, I just wanted to generally provide information about LAFCO. And again, my name is Colette Sanchi. I serve as executive officer of LAFCO. And we can get started. We have some slides that will just generally provide background on why LAFCOs exist, its composition, overview and authority. So, and then we'll get into process with regard to the annexation process. And if there's any throughout, please don't hesitate or we'll take questions in there. All right, so about LAFCO, and hopefully everyone can see this all right. So LAFCO, it stands for Local Agency Formation Commission. It's an independent regulatory body established by the state legislature in 1963, and really to oversee the organization, formation, and development of local agencies, and boundary changes, service expansion, extension, and it all came about as part of post-World War II and just the growth of population and development that was occurring at time. And so the state the state legislature created LAFCOs in each county. And so there's 58 LAFCOs overseeing cities and special districts. Again, the formation, the changes in boundaries, and the provision of services. And we'll talk about composition, but the LAFCO has county, city, special district, and public representation. I wanted to just speak about the commissioner's role. So this comes right out of the Courtesy-Knox-Hertzberg Act. I won't read it, but while serving on the commission, because again, we have county board of supervisors sitting on the commission, city council members, special district elected board members, and members of the public. So broad representation. And while serving on the commission, those commissioners are expected to serve with independent judgment and placing the interests of the public as a whole above those of their agency that appointed them. So we talked about the LAFCO hat. And so you can, That was actually the perfect timing. So we're talking about the LAFCO hat and just the need at, you know, when commissioners are attending LAFCO meetings and making decisions that come before the commission, that they have this broader perspective. And the next slide is related to LAFCO composition. Again, we have a 7-member commission, 2 county board of supervisors, 2 city council members, 2 independent special district members, and 1 member of the public, and each of those categories has an alternate member. There are 61 member agencies in Humboldt County, so 7 cities, and there's 53 independent special districts, and the remainder are dependent special districts, and a variety of different types, whether it be community service districts, fire districts, cemetery, or water districts. And LAFCO has both regulatory and planning responsibilities and functions. So I'll start with the regulatory, and that's LAFCO operates under the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act. That's in the government code, and those are the government code sections. LAFCO again oversees and reviews and approves changes of organization and reorganization. So that includes operations, district formations, annexations, detachments, consolidations, new powers activation. So a community service district may be providing just water and wastewater. They want to provide recreation. That takes a LAFCO process to develop a plan for services. LAFCO wants to see that there's a plan in place both for staffing and that there's the fiscal ability to provide that new service. And also extension of services by contract or agreement. So cities and districts providing water and wastewater services outside of their boundaries by contract or agreement. The property or another government also requires LAFCO review. And we'll talk about that a little bit more too. So I want to stress that LAFCO does not have land use authority. So cities and counties have land use authority. They have the general plan, they develop land use designations and zoning designations and regulate those land uses. LAFCO cannot, through its actions, regulate the use of land, property development, or subdivision requirements. When a city comes forward with an annexation proposal, they have pre-zones that annexation area. We cannot change that pre-zone. We look at what that will, we look at the type of pre-zoning and the type of services that would be supplied. So those types of uses, demand and services, those types of things. So we cannot change the pre-zone. So yes, factors considered. This is just a short list with regard to any change of organization or reorganization proposal. We look at consistency with county general plan specific plans, local coastal programs, current and probable future need for services, growth, and cost and adequacy of services, and sort of going into the different types of boundary changes. So also, at the core is an agency's jurisdictional boundary. That's the area where they have authority to govern and provide services. And then LAFCO also has its own planning boundary that is adopted by LAFCO, and it indicates the probable physical boundaries and service area of a local agency. And so we'll go through the different types of spheres that LAFCO establishes, and we establish the spheres of influence. That's part of our planning authority through municipal service reviews. So spheres of influence, and this is a little hard to see just with the lighting, but this is the Manila Community Services District on the peninsula. And their jurisdictional boundary is quite large and covers their service area. And so their sphere of influence is coterminous and matches their jurisdictional boundary. And that says to LAFCO, to the district, and to the public that there is not anticipated growth or extension of services. So we look at that through the municipal service review process, and that sphere is updated every time we go through that service review. Expanded sphere of influence. So this is Trinidad's adopted sphere of influence. And we reviewed the municipal service review for the city of Trinidad, I think 4 years ago, and did a comprehensive look. We did make amendments to the sphere to reflect the out of agency or the existing water service connections that are provided out of city limits. And those were pre-existing connections prior to 2000. And we'll talk about that. That's prior to 2000, cities and districts did not need to come to LAFCO to receive approval if they were to connect out of city, out of jurisdictional boundaries. But from 2000 on, it requires LAFCO review and approval. And we'll talk about extension of services versus annexation. So this shows the yellow is the sphere of influence for the city of Trinidad. And you see that it's larger than the jurisdictional boundary or city limits boundary. And so this says to the public, to the city, to LAFCO, that there's areas that either are receiving public services now, which is the case, and that may be appropriate for annexation in the future. And then here's just an example of a contracted sphere or a reduced sphere. This is for a small water district outside of the city of Arcata. And this area that's in this contracted sphere is not receiving services and is largely TPZ and will not receive certain levels of service in the future. So if there ever is a boundary cleanup, like we do recognize that the LAFCO boundary change process does require it, is costly. And so it's more in the future, if there ever was a separate annexation, potentially this detachment could be brought on as part of a combined application and a boundary cleanup. So the sphere also kind of helps document this potential boundary change. All right, with that, so we talked about that LAFCOs oversee boundary changes and as part of the regulatory function, and also has that planning function of municipal service reviews and spheres. And so I thought we would talk a little bit more about the application process. So again, any annexation out of agency services, activation of latent powers, or sphere amendments that are not part of our typical updates would require a LAFCO agency or member of the public. Next slide. So how to initiate an application, there's 2 ways. So resolution of application adopted by affected local agency, like a city or special district. This is the preferred method because this, as the service provider, they would go through first their process to review the boundary change and also do the environmental review associated with that and service lead agency request process. And then a second way is by petition, either by property owners or registered voters within an affected area can come together, say this area we want to either annex or we want to form a new district. And so we have received registered voter petitions, but they're typically for fire district formations that we've received them for. So with regard to an application, we have the resolution or petition that would be part of the application, the actual LAFCO form. A plan for services is part of the application for an annexation, and that really lays out how services are going to be provided, the infrastructure needs, and how they would be funded. Pre-zoning, again, this is for city annexations only, would require that to be part of the city's a map and boundary description of the annexation area that gets filed with both the county and state. And then the environmental review and then ultimately the LAFCO processing fees for cities. For city annexations, there's a master property tax sharing agreement for all the cities already in place between the city and county. So that really streamlines that. And just tips for successful applications, working in frequent coordination with LAFCO and other regulatory agencies that would have some sort of action associated with it. Public outreach and engagement really to build understanding and support. Completing the environmental review process and all the other discretionary actions. And this is a process flow chart that you absolutely cannot read, but I can speak to it somewhat. So we talked already about, you know, the pre-application is pulling together all the components of the LAFCO application, a plan for services, bringing it forward to Planning Commission or City Council, all of those steps. Once it's submitted to LAFCO and there's a the council adopts a resolution of approval requesting LAFCO take action on a proposed annexation. Application is filed. LAFCO staff has 30 days to deem the application complete, and we initially right away do agency referrals to county departments and other interested and affected agencies. And then in that 30 days, deem the application complete and also do the notice for the property tax exchange process and coordinate with the city and the county. And then once the application is deemed complete, we have a certain number of days to then take it to hearing. And so between that period, we do our noticing to affected landowners or registered voters. If it's less than 1,000, if it's more than 1,000, we do a 1-8-page display ad in a local newspaper that, advising of the public hearing and the opportunity to attend and provide comments either before or during the hearing. If it's less than 1,000 combined registered voters and property owners within the proposed annexation area and 300 feet adjacent to, we do mail notices. And so that likely would be the case. For district formations, it's typically affected property owners and potential voters. So we'll do a notice in the new. And so then we'll hold our hearing. So that notice goes out at least 21 days before the public hearing on the annexation. LAFCO staff, we notice it. We have our agenda. We have a very detailed staff report. We make findings and determinations, a staff report and recommendation to the commission. And then so we'll hold that hearing. If the commission approves, it triggers a 30-day reconsideration period. So during that 30 days, we wait to see if any members of the public or any agency submits a request for reconsideration. And I've only received one in my life, in my time with Humboldt LAFCO. And so that reconsideration would really stop the process if one was received, and then the commission would then notice the next meeting to consider that reconsideration and either change or amend their action. If there was no reconsideration received in that 30 days, we would then notice for the protest hearing. And so the protest hearing is held as a separate, another 21-day notice goes out, mailed notice to property owners, letting them know that the commission approved the annexation proposal, and that there will be a protest hearing to consider written protests from, again, the only affected landowners and registered voters within the annexation area to be able to protest and potentially terminate the LAFCO's action for annexation. And so the protest proceedings, I typically hold the hearing. The commission has delegated that authority to the executive officer, so I can hold the hearing in the affected territory or nearby. And then so the protest thresholds, that's all in here, but very fine print. The protest thresholds are basically if less than 25% of the landowners who own 25% or less of the assessed value within the annexation area protest, or less than 25% of the registered voters within the annexation area protest, then the commission's action stands and is valid and is complete. If more than 25% of registered voter or landowners and less than 50% protest, then it goes to an election, and that election would be held just again for the affected territory, and it would be just the registered voters at that point that would get to vote yes or no on the annexation. And if more than 50% of the registered voters protest at that hearing, it would terminate the LAFCO's act. So the protest hearing is really the final opportunity for landowners within and registered voters within the annexation area to reverse this decision. Otherwise, I take back the final, I bring back a resolution confirming the protest proceedings and finalizing the annexation to the next commission's meeting. We go through any condition compliance and then record the annexation with a certificate of completion with the county recorder's office, and then file the annexation with the Board of Equalization. And so then that area is officially district. So that's the process. And all right, next slide. I wanted to just really quickly, so activation of powers, I won't speak to this too much. Again, this is if a district wanted to provide a new power that it doesn't already provide. Those types of actions come before LAFCO, and it's a separate application. And then out of agency services, again, so for Trinidad and for several cities and districts, there's water services and even wastewater services provided outside of agency boundaries. A lot of that occurred, decades ago. And at that time didn't require LAFCO approval. And, water lines get built and there's a tendency to connect if there's infrastructure there. So now there is a process for LAFCO approval for any new out-of-agency or extension of services. Again, annexation, keeping the boundaries clean, and making those service areas a part of the jurisdictional boundary of an agency is preferred and is encouraged. But we do recognize that there are times when, local conditions or circumstances do require, annexation isn't feasible, and an out-of-agency contract or agreement between the two parties does make the most sense. So that's this slide. To that, We talked about this in length, our planning functions being the municipal service reviews and other special studies. Next slide. And here is just an municipal service reviews. I think I just wanted to touch on here are very comprehensive. They used to be really small documents when LAFCO first started, really highlighting what services, when an agency was formed, and just the basic items. But now it's really used as a tool to identify service gaps, opportunities, services, looking at disadvantaged unincorporated communities within or adjacent to spheres of influence, just trends or demands for and hazards. It's a comprehensive document, and so we post our municipal service reviews on our website, and you can also find the City of Trinidad's as well. And we do special studies. There's not a lot of funding to do. Wish we had more funding to do more regional based special studies, but that's why we're starting to do more regional based municipal service reviews so that we can look broadly at service needs more comprehensively on a regional basis. So we've done this for like fire services and other regional type reviews as necessary. All right, with that, I am available for questions. Thanks for having me.
All right, thank you very much. Are there council any questions for extension? Twice.
So why is annexation preferred over out of agency?
Well, one is once it's within the boundary, you don't have to do a block code. So, and you're able to, as a jurisdiction, be able to apply your ordinances and municipal code to that area as well, which is important. But yeah, each out of agency connection has to come to LAFCO, and so that's a lot of applications. It really stifles, just the ability to serve an area, because that process drags on.
If I didn't quite catch, like if there's a vote, if between 25 protests, example of Trinidad, would it be the entire city that voted or just the area that?
Good question. It's just the affected territory. So it's just the annexation area that gets the protest vote.
Right. So it could be like 5 houses, 6 houses.
Yes. And so that's where doing the outreach. I mean, when it's a small area, that you should have a really good sense of the level of support from those property owners and registered voters that are residing in that area. And because what's the point of moving forward with the costly annexation process if it's just going to get to a protest vote and then get denied?
Right.
So doing that early outreach before an application even gets submitted is really critical.
So special districts can annex also?
Yeah.
Not just cities?
Correct. So they have their jurisdictional boundary and they can expand it as well.
It seems like the special districts are a little underrepresented on the LAFCO.
Yeah, there are a lot of special districts in the county, and yeah, it's just how the composition is set up.
Do they take turns on LAFCO?
Yeah, it's really based on interest. It's challenging. I mean, we've had some special district representatives from like Fruitland, and they drive 45, 50 minutes or more to LAFCO meetings. So we've had some longstanding special district representatives and some really good actual, a lot of interests there actually.
What are the districts now?
Right now, Heidi Benzanelli from Humboldt Community Services District, and Troy Nicolini from Peninsula Community Services District. And then my alternate is David Couch from the Kinley Community Services District.
What's the legal counsel for LAFCO?
Good question. That's Ryan Watts. He's with the Mitchell Law Firm. Mhm.
Attorney's weeds.
Yeah, and so that it does occur where, items will come forward, annexations, and he will recuse himself. And it's not often that, they need to be involved in anything specific to, the annexation or proposal review. It's more, so he will recuse himself, and if we needed to have, separate counsel, we would get back up. So.
Thank you very much. That was very informative.
Yeah, thank you. Kate,
Just to go back to something Rob
can you use
asked.
your mic? Sorry.
Go back to something that Ross said. The area being annexed, they can do a protest vote, but for example, the city of Trinidad could not.
Yeah, it's just affected, yes, you're right. So the residents within the existing city are not part of the protest vote. You're correct. And so it's the annexation area, is, the property owners and registered voters within the affected territory that are being considered for annexation are the ones that get the notices and then also, get the ability to protest.
I know that annexation is preferred by LAFCO when we begin to offer, for example, water services within our service area, but outside of our kind of the district, I guess. It's preferred, but is there an opportunity for Trinidad to meet the needs of the residents to, for example, provision water, and then with the idea that the council would review annexation of that area later?
Good question. And the law more or less suggests that, but for more of a health and safety. And so it's really set up to be where in times where there's a failing septic system or some other, immediate health and safety risk, that the property owner and the service provider can come straight to LAFCO, receive approval for that connection in anticipation of annexation. And so then, the service provider can come back in 12 months and annex that property. Again, it's piecemeal, like property by property by property. So if there's a way to, comprehensively look at where you're providing services and annex an area and do the outreach with all of those property owners and residents within that area, that's where bigger bang for your buck. You deal with, the planning that's associated with that area and not doing piecemeal connections.
Thank you. Commissioners, sorry.
I guess I have a question. You had a map up there with some proposed scope of influence, right? So do you have an estimate of how many households or registered voters that are included in your surveys that you?
Good question. I don't have that in front of me. We could put that together. There is a broader, so the sphere of influence doesn't include the full water service area of the city. And maybe Trevor could speak to the work that that's been done by our staff to evaluate the water service area and that. But the sphere of influences are really cleaned up, and primarily that the core area near the city that didn't extend all the way to your source facility.
But annexation doesn't have to include the entire service.
It doesn't. So you could also, based on property owner interest or, an area that makes sense, post a sub area.
I'll go to the commission next, since we do have the planning commission here. Any questions regarding annexation? Because I know this is something you guys have been looking at as well. Okay, and then, yes, let's go to public.
You mentioned the.
Sorry, what's
LAFCO fees. Can you say something about the size of them or how you're determined?
For annexations are actually. So I think you said 3,000, that was for an out of agency service extension. For annexations, we request a deposit, for 5,000. Typically, I think we have a 7,000 if it's a very complex. But we do, it's a deposit. Our policy is full cost recovery. So we track, our time processing the application, doing all the staff reports, all the noticing, all the costs for the noticing, the postage, the media, the costs for putting it in the newspaper and taking it to hearing, doing the protest hearing, and then doing the Board of Equalization filing. The Board of Equalization filing is based on acreage, and those costs can be a couple thousand. So, we can estimate costs as you get closer, but typically I would say by the time it's all said and done for an annexation, closer to 10,000.
My name is Mike Kavanaugh. I'm a resident at 295 Porter Road. It also borders on Mill Creek. And we have applied for it. Originally, we were told that that was possible last year and a half or so. So now it's shifted over to the fact that they want to annex the whole neighborhood, which is 5 or 6 houses. And so we were led to believe that there was a possibility of individual, which 30 years ago was impossible. And so a little bit stuck as to where to go now. So I guess my main question with does the city, if I understood it right, so you can do this without LAFCO on an individual basis? Or does LAFCO control the individual ones rather than the annexation of the neighborhood?
What I heard, and I probably should maybe defer this question to you, Trevor, since you have the most experience, but what I believe I just heard was that individual hookups to water could be approved by the city, with the idea, though, that we will evaluate annexation and of that individual property. And then in this case, in the case of Mill Creek, we have other houses, as you point out, who may want to hook up. So we might look at annexation to do the whole neighborhood. So that's what I heard. And Trevor, maybe you want to weigh in here?
Well, so both annexation or an individual connection require LAFCO.
Yes.
And if we could do an individual connection with the idea that, future annexation, but we have to show, and my understanding is, if we're not going to annex, we have to show why it's impractical or infeasible at this time. And so that's the idea of this GHD study to look at water pressure in that area and whether it is feasible to hook up everybody. That's one step. And then I think the next step would be the public outreach, because if everyone's like, no, then there's no point in proceeding, and then we would proceed with just the individual.
So it's possible that the next step in the Mill Creek situation would be the outreach. That is done by city or LAFCO.
I think we would ask for some help with, reaching out to people and materials, but it would be the city's responsibility, I think. And we might ask the applicants for some help as well, and maybe have a meeting.
Concerned with putting forward any more money to find out that it's a real deal. So if we, myself and the other party, continue on the basis of individual. Is that how we talk to you? Is that we would like an individual hookup?
Well, again, we still have to do the legwork to see if annexation. So, you know, maybe it might make sense to start the public outreach before we do the PhD study. We could do that.
That's what I was considering. It all came back.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money. Well, thank you.
Hello, my name is Jen Pierce. I live on Mill Creek Lane on the Way track. I'm the other applicant for water, and I've been pursuing this for several years now, trying to get source. And I was curious about that. It says this on your agenda: the city will need to collect additional deposits from the applicants to cover the cost of the study, and staff have reached out to the applicant. So I have not been reached out to. I paid my $3,000, which I thought was going to be the permitting cost to apply to LAFCO. Apparently that is not true. I don't know what that $3,000 was for then. And I have not been reached out with any of this. It's been completely on me to come and try to figure this out. And I would really like to see Mike and I be able to get special dispensation for water, with the idea that we will be pursuing annexation in the future, because I believe that was already the plan, where we are in the first section of districts that would be annexed, I believe. And so if that is already in the plan, that you're planning on having that annexation, I would really like to see us get water. I am one of the few residents on our way tract that does not have city water. I have a fire hydrant 20 feet from my house. And I do understand that there are issues with water pressure. However, these issues had already been studied and recorded previously before I even applied for the city. And if that was the case, and I'm now having this be hinged on whether or not there's enough pressure, I don't understand why the city of Trinidad took my money knowing that there's not enough pressure to give me my water services. So I'd like that to be addressed, if you would.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to respond right now, or shall we hold on this for now?
I mean, some of that's probably beyond the agenda item. I will
Yes.
say we did have GHD look. I did send you an email that was the email that was listed on your application. And GHD did do a study and a memo to show that hooking up these two connections is not going to the service area.
Okay.
So we do have.
Okay. So, and I wanted just to kind of clarify the purpose of this particular agenda item tonight was to bring us all up to speed on what annexation is all about. And that's so that we can bring items to the council, like annexation of Mill Creek, and the council is educated about what that means and what the process is. So we're probably not as prepared to handle specific, situations, and as well as we might otherwise be. So but we are well aware of the situation, and staff and I think we'll talk offline and come up with a plan and an approach for those specific situations. If that makes sense. I do want to, Mr. Johnson from the commission had, I think, some questions about annexation.
Yes, thank you. The first question is hopefully very simple, and that is, can we get either posted on the website or somehow get copies of your slide deck?
Of course.
That logic diagram is very informative, and it's difficult to see, and I think it would be useful for all of us to have copies of that so we can kind of digest that a little bit more. My other question was, it was always my understanding, and I say it this way, my understanding was that any annexation of area had to be contiguous with the boundaries of the city. Is You're nodding your head, so that is,
That is,
that is
yes,
correct.
I did not cover that. Yes, that's important for cities. In very limited situations can cities have non-contiguous territory. And like the city of Arcata has a tract, forest tract ownership that is part of their city limits, and it requires special legislation. So yes, for cities, it must be contiguous. Special districts can actually have non-contiguous.
You say special legislation, is that at the county level or at the state? Okay, thank you.
Right, did you?
Yeah, I just had a.
Yes, sir.
I just sort of, I have another comment on it from a planning commission standpoint. Does the entity losing the parcels have any recourse to protests? Because there's always a financial loss, for example, the county loses tax base. I just have 4 quick ones. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the first one. And then does LAFCO as part of the package provide any financial information on the gain or loss to the entity, in this case, the city, will be getting it? Third, I think is probably a fairly obvious question, but I want to confirm it's an all or nothing approach for annexation. You can't simply annex just water services, it's all services that they provide in there. And then the fourth, relative to Richard's last question and the contiguous boundaries, my understanding is that cherry stem annexation is no longer legal, where you go along a very narrow right of way and then a little house. And I just want to confirm that's still the case as well.
Any questions? All right, so for the first question regarding, so for a city annexation, it would go from unincorporated territory that is regulated by the county to incorporated city regulated territory. And so the county does not have the ability to protest per se, like property owners and landowners do, but they are, they will get notification as part of the agency referral, and they would review the application. I typically will get letters just confirming from planning department, public works department, that they've reviewed the application, they don't have comments, or that they do have comments. They, like public works, for instance, they very much want to see that full road lengths are included in the annexation area, that the annexation boundary isn't splitting the road and one half the road will be maintained by the county and the other by the city, or that full intersections are included. So they are keeping an eye on, the proposed annexation boundary. Planning department, they may have comments, but otherwise, unless there was some significant concerns by the county, actually like revenue loss with they wouldn't protest something like this, or submit a letter of objection. That's the first. The second one was regarding just within the review of the annexation that the financial impacts are considered, and that's something that LAFCO will review. Some cities actually will hire a consultant to do like a fiscal impact analysis. We don't require that, and we're not going to do that per se. But that can be done. Generally, commercial uses with sales tax and those revenues are a positive benefit to a city, whereas existing residential is more of a drain with regard to the fiscal considerations. But LAFCO will, there will be a plan for services. It will review how services will be provided and the financial ability to provide those services. So for water and wastewater, let's say, it's fees for services. So at the very basis, services will be funded through utilities, Other property taxes, there would be a property tax exchange agreement between the city and the county, and a portion of the 1% ad valorem that is now going to the county would be transferred to the city. The third is with regard to city annexations, is it all or nothing? And typically, yes, it is all or nothing with regard to providing the full range of city services. Again, sometimes there's concerns about annexing roads, roads that maybe do not meet city road, current road, standards, city road standards. And, there's a recognition that that road is not going to be able to, be widened. So there's recognition for that. For that, it's not going to be improved right away to city standards, those sort of things. I think there's probably some instances where a city would annex only for certain services if another agency is providing to others. Let's say there's a fire protection district, they're not going to provide fire services, or if there's some other contracts with another service provider through like a county service area, then they wouldn't provide those services to that area. And then the last, yes, with regard to kind of cherry picking or following roads then to grab an area that is discouraged, and LAFCO reviews and, make sure that annexation boundaries follow lines of assessment are logical. Part of LAFCO's role is logical boundaries.
Thank you. I'll go online to public comment. Ms. Levine, I believe you had your hand raised. Can you hear us? Okay, I'm going to move on, and if Paula comes back, we'll go ahead and add her comments. With that, I'll bring it back to the council. Any additional thoughts or comments on this topic?
Yeah, one more question. It may be difficult, but how bad does your water have to be before you're eligible for immediate hookup and later annexation?
We typically will want to have County Department of Environmental Health come out to the property and review the system. And it's typically either a low, supply, if it's like on an existing well that's just running dry, there's a supply issue or there's some sort of contamination issue for water.
So environmental health would certify the need for that.
And also identify that, there's an existing water line that's, right there, and it would be feasible for them to connect. So yes. And then the wastewater is more common, failing septic systems are very clearly a health safety.
All right, thank you. I think that concludes our session on annexation, and I want to thank our speaker. Thank you very much, Colette, for coming and joining us. It was really informative, and rest assured there'll be probably more discussions about this topic going forward. All right, so the next item is the discussion decision regarding first reading of ordinance 2025-01, which is designating the fire hazard severity zone as recommended by the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection. I believe Trevor is going to give us a staff report on this item.
Yeah, so I think this is pretty straightforward, but obviously people are concerned about fire issues and things like that. But state law requires CAL FIRE to designate fire hazard severity zones, and they do that for both primarily state responsibility areas, but with the uptick in fires, there's been more focus on local responsibility areas where local jurisdiction has fire suppression authority. And so just in the late last year, they updated all the state responsibility area maps, and then this year they're coming out with the city maps for the local responsibility areas. Again, this is all dictated by state law. The city has a certain period of time to publish the maps that were put out by CAL FIRE. They're all based on specific modeling. And the city really has no say in this. And if there's good reason to, we can increase the severity, but we have no authority to decrease the severity. And then we have, a certain period of time to adopt these designations by ordinance. So that's what this is. This is the city of Trinidad. The yellow is the moderate. The white and gray areas are federal responsibility areas. So that's the Rancheria. Yellow. And then the red is the very high. And, this I found really surprising because apparently their models are taking ember transmission as a significant fire source. And I don't really understand where embers are going to come from to ahead. And it is the only very high fire hazard severity zone on the entire North Coast.
Yes.
It's very strange. But again, we have no say in this. And it really, these zones, the moderate doesn't really bring in any new requirements. High and very high, you start to get stricter building code, building permitting requirements, defensible space requirements, water supply, ingress, egress. Those sorts of things start to apply in high and very high, but because Trinidad Head is all open space, none of those are going to apply anyway. So really, in essence, this does not affect the city in terms of our regulations and how people have to. It doesn't affect individual property owners as far as I know. My understanding is this is a hazard. It's not a risk assessment. So this also isn't going to affect insurance. So it kind of is what it is. And so the ordinance we're proposing as the first reading of this ordinance, it's just essentially adopting these designations.
All right, any questions from the council on this ordinance? This would be the first reading. We have to have 2 readings, is that correct? So this is first reading.
Just an observation, I guess we're lucky we didn't get categorized as extremely hazardous.
Well,
In between, very, very,
well, very high is the highest.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
I thought that was one higher.
It's moderate, high, and very high.
Extreme.
No, not that I know of.
Oh, well.
I think we're all a little surprised that Trinidad Head is rated very high, but it is what it is. Any questions or comments from the commissioners, and then we'll go to the public? Any commission comments? Oh, you want to speak as a member of the public? Okay, Commissioner Johnson.
So just a question, not that it necessarily is applicable here, but I'm just curious, the green area on the map is all Humboldt. Are there then various pieces of this which are rated differently as well?
The entire Trinidad planning area is moderate.
Okay.
Right. Members of the public, Mr. Hagen, I believe you had your hand raised first.
Yeah, I don't know which hat I should wear to ask this question, honestly. But obviously I'm critical infrastructure, right? Radio towers, that kind of stuff. There's federal as well as I understand county repeaters there. How does this map impact that decisions to protect and create the additional obligation on the city for defensible space? Because, if this is a high severity area, and I believe part of what the city manager shared earlier is that there's an egress concern, it just makes me think about that as an obligation for the city and think about fire protection needs. The county radio site would be quite devastating based off it's having been on large campaign fires professionally. That's a spot where resources get sent on purpose to protect critical infrastructure. So, do you have any thought on that?
That's a good question. Not to my knowledge, most of the requirements that I know of apply to habitable structures. But it's certainly, I think, something that the city could talk with the county and fire departments with in terms of what should be done to keep that space safe. And certainly, you know, there's the federal areas where they can do their own vegetation management, but open space areas, environmentally sensitive habitat areas, which are generally exempt from.
I can't see on the line if there are any folks with hands raised, so let me know. Any comments on the line? Okay, let's bring it back then to the council and additional questions or a motion?
I think we have to do anything on as far as the first reading.
We don't have to make a motion for a first reading. Okay, is that correct?
So that should be in the record or?
Yeah, I mean, you usually read the title instead of the whole ordinance. But I believe you should make a motion, and I apologize for not having the same.
Excellent, need to approve the first reading of this ordinance.
Correct. So, okay. So, do you?
Yeah, I would
wanna
say
do it, or-
I move that we approve the first reading.
Right. And the second,
Whatever the number of this.
yeah, it's ordinance, well, it's the Trinidad FHSZ ordinance 2025-01. And Katie is seconding the approval of the first reading. All those in favor? Aye. So we've approved the first reading of this ordinance. Thank you very much. All right, so the next thing on our agenda, which the item formerly known as number 2, is the MOA between City of Trinidad and Stry Heights Indian Community of the Trinidad Rancheria, granting permission to include city roads on its National Tribal Transportation Facility inventory. So we discussed this at our last meeting, and then this is coming back to us.
That's correct, Mayor, member of the City Council. Tonight we have follow-up to last month's meeting where map was, we were notified the map was not complete. We have the complete map attached to your council packet, and we are asking for your approval of this item.
Okay. So let's start with the council. Any questions about the Rancheria MO? I had I'm unfortunately having trouble getting the map to come up, but should I be concerned at all about the boundaries, including, for example, the Galendo Trail and the Galendo Trail, and I think there's another little.
I think this MOA, Mayor, for the point of this conversation, this MOA is only for the streets.
Okay, so it doesn't matter whether.
Yeah, it's the streets inventory, and it's their ability to go out and get grants based on projects they see as connected to their properties and being able to help repair and repave those streets.
Yeah. Okay, great. That's what I thought. Thank you. All right. Any other questions from the council? Okay. Are there any questions from members of the public regarding the Rancheria MOA? David?
It's related, and Joe may have just answered it. Oh, sorry, I'm Andrew Davis, Philadelphia Hector.
Thank you.
I just noticed that the map, it's funny that we saw them back to back. The map was different in the fire hazard for this area than it is in this thing. And I just feel like, I'm just feeling a little confused, but it sounds like we're sure that there's no implication to this, that maybe there's some other things that are I don't know, or assumptions in here that we're binding ourselves to. I guess that's what I'm just concerned about.
Nothing that council won't have the ability to weigh in on, it's just approving a map of streets that connect to the French rear properties.
Thanks. Yeah, I wasn't very clear. I was looking at the tribal boundary in this document, and it's really not relevant because we're actually talking about the streets on the map. So that was my kind of going a little too deep on it. Any other public comments on this item? Okay, I'll bring it back to the council then.
I'll move that we approve the letter that was in the packet, essentially agreeing to cooperate with listing the city roads as also tribal roads.
Okay. I'll second, since I haven't seconded for a while. And all those in favor? Aye. So moved, thank you. All right, the next item is the discussion decision regarding the contract with Humboldt County Sheriff's Office to provide law enforcement services to the city of Trinidad. So I'll turn it over to Joe for a staff report.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Tonight we have for your discussion and approval the FY 25-26 Sheriff's and Animal Control Services. This is part items 3 and 4 on your agenda. Up for your discussion right now is item 3. It's the Sheriff's Agreement. Good news with the Sheriff's Agreement is there's a $7,000 reduction from previous year. So that's the good news. There is a slight increase for the animal control services of about $936, but an overall savings of $6,400 between the two. So services are not going to be diminished. We're going to have the same Lieutenant McCall is still going to be our lieutenant from McKinleyville. Said they're fully staffed and have done a long time, and animal control services and the shelters included in this contract. So happy to answer questions if you have any.
All right, council, any questions about the, this is the law enforcement agreement. We're talking about animal control next.
Well, I read it over very carefully. Actually found a couple of typos in the agreement that's already signed, so too late to correct those. But I think it's great. We've got their services, and we get a reduced fee this time around.
Yeah, I think it's the same. It's the same pretty much agreement we had last year.
It is. There was some question about risk that the sheriff's office is asking us to accept. There is some discussion among our risk management agency there. I discussed this at length with both them and our city attorney, and they feel that the risk is manageable, and we're going to continue.
Okay. Yeah, and that was the same before as well.
We're going to continue with our Pacific security system. We don't end up with an aggregate more service than we had.
We will end up with the law enforcement stays the same, but for less cost. And then Pacific Security, I believe, is the same.
But we're asking them for costs right now for the upcoming budget. We'll have that discussion in May, Mayor, council members.
So
but in terms of service,
those costs, that's correct.
Thank you. All right, there are no other questions from the council. I go to the commission and the public. Any questions regarding the law enforcement agreement? All right, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council for a motion.
We approve the First Amendment to the agreement with the Humboldt County Sheriff to provide law enforcement. We're going to do animal control next.
Yeah, we'll do animal control next. Is there a second for law enforcement? Carrie is seconding. All those in favor? Aye. And thank you for the, thank you, Bryce.
Aye.
I see. And And I wanted to thank Joe for getting this done again and at an even lower cost. And we got a great deal last year, so this is even better. So
Yeah, it's always good when
fantastic.
lower law enforcement costs doesn't happen very often in my time.
I know.
Agencies, honestly.
Yeah, it's really, really great.
Pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
And no lowering of services, so.
That's exactly, yeah. Same service level agreement.
Right.
All right, so the next item is the discussion decision to approve contracts with Humboldt County Sheriff to provide animal control and shelter services to the city.
Mayor and members of the council, we have tonight for your discussion and decision approval, animal control services and animal shelter within the city of Trinidad by Humboldt County for the fiscal year 24-25 through 26-29. So this is a 3-year agreement. This is the first year of the 3-year agreement, and that's what these costs are addressing. A slight increase of $938 for animal control services, but as I said earlier, it's an overall savings for the animal control services and sheriff's office of $6,400. So a little bit of an increase for animal control services. Much considering the shared services that we get from animal control.
Yeah, and the great thing is in the past, before last year's contract with animal control, we just had a what do you call it? I'm sorry, drawing a blank. We had at the animal shelter, we had a spot for one animal, right? Kennel. But now with the second agreement, then we have also animal control services within the city, which we didn't have before. So that was really great addition last year. So the fact that we have not only the kennel and animal services, but we also have an animal control agreement is, was additive. And so, so I'm a fan of this. I think it's great given some of the issues we've had with off-leash dogs and things.
Yeah, I agree, Mayor, and I would say that I have seen the animal control services officer in town in their truck. I would also ask the residents and visitors who are listening and hear that if you have an issue with an animal that's off leash or something that concerns you, please call 911 and they will come out and respond to your concerns. And then you will have a record of a misbehaving animal or human. That will help the animal control officer make better decisions going forward if they have the same call from the same address or the same animal.
Yeah. So 911 if it's an aggressive dog,
Right.
This is not.
Yeah, otherwise just call the McKinleyville Sheriff's Office. And I talked with Lieutenant McCall about an incident we had this weekend and he followed up on it. By the time they got here, the person was on site, but they're still that person identified.
Oh, good. Yes.
So I have a question. I know we had talked on council before about the city hall also keeping records and encouraging the residents to call the city hall if there is a dog off leash or an aggressive dog, just so that our records can help us.
I would encourage them to call the sheriff's office. That's a better record. It's the animal control services officer is the one who's going to make the decision on what to do with the animal. And if they don't have a complete record, it's hard for them to make a good decision. So I would say to call animal control services and or the sheriff's office to have better service and a better end result.
I don't know the protocol. Is this something, since it is a departure from what we had understood on animal advisory committee and the council had discussed, can we take it back to the committee? And
yeah, I mean, one of the things about the calling the office is that they're only there 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, right? So that's one of the issues is they will only be able to report complaints that they get during those hours. And then the other issue is calling the office first is there's not a whole, they don't have enforcement there. So essentially, if you call the office, they're then going to turn around and call animal control. So it was always, but I understand that the committee, the animal advisory committee, did come up with a strategy that they, like the magnets, they call the office, right? It's the office number, I believe. So you may want to talk about that and maybe have staff there to decide if that should continue. If your recommendation is to continue that, then we need to figure out how that would work.
get more
Does that make
specific.
sense? Yeah, like what's the process, maybe a little flow chart of how that would work for
Well,
expediency?
the dog that Ted's finger off.
Yeah.
Um, there would have been no calling of animal control up to that point. But he was known, she was known to be an aggressive dog by the neighbors.
Yeah.
So that's why, and yeah, that was the
And
rationale.
maybe it's both, there may be an option for both, so that if you know that there's a dog in your neighborhood that's appearing to become more aggressive, but it's not really to the point where you call animal control, there's no harm in calling city clerk and, what were you gonna say something, Dave or Joe? Yeah.
But it,
And we're gonna call in on control services, that's what we're gonna do. That's what I'm gonna direct staff.
but it is kosher to take it back.
Yeah, maybe discuss it a little more based on what we just spoke about, and then see if the committee agrees that that's a good process as well. If, maybe we're missing something, but my hunch is that calling the office is just, not as expedient now that we have this contract. So we may not have had this when you guys first formed, but now that we have this response.
And thinking develops, so.
Yeah.
Can I
Okay.
add something really quick to that? Nope. What happened this weekend, we got an email. So remember, any emails that are complaints about anything are on record. They become city records. They are something that we do law. So as Joe mentioned, he responded by calling in. So
Yeah.
two things happened at once. Number one, we got a record. Number two, animal control was called.
And
So
the
I think
person
we're
involved
talking about
called.
the same thing.
The person involved, the complainant, also called 911 in the moment, though, right? Or called the sheriff's office
Yeah,
in the
sheriff's
moment.
office.
Yeah.
So I think,
Yeah.
it kind of goes both ways. If someone calls the city and we're available, we're gonna log that complaint. It's gonna be in the city's records and we can categorize it by criteria, all complaints, but then to respond.
And then we will call the sheriff's office on that.
Yeah, without belaboring this point, but I know you're going to be meeting the Animal Advisory Committee later this month. The experience that I've had on a number of occasions calling animal control is that I get a voicemail. So I think it's really imperative. What Joe said is call 911. If you've got a dog coming at you, don't, or is aggressive, don't even bother calling animal control. Call 911. So, and then we will have a good record. So.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, so we digress a bit, but this is about the animal agreement. Is there anything else in the agreement that anyone would like to ask questions about or change from the council perspective? It's good. Okay, I'm gonna go to the public. Any questions or comments from the public? Please, a member of the Animal Advisory Committee.
And to steal from Aaron, I'm wearing that hat, I think, at the moment. To add on to actually what Katie was saying, I think some of and Joe, this was pre-AC, so maybe it'll help a little bit. And I think back maybe like September-ish minutes, it might reflect it. I can't remember exactly when we talked about it. But we actually had someone from animal control come and speak with us and kind of clarify how they saw the relationship with us. Now, this may have completely changed because it's been 6 months and you've had conversations in this agreement and all kinds of stuff. But the idea of having people call City Hall was actually the result of them essentially saying, look, we're not going to show up with public nuisance, and we're probably not going to show up with potentially aggressive. We will show up for aggressive, or what they call violent. That kind of the 3-tier system for dog classification. And so there was sort of this idea, and Katie, I think you were just adding a little context to what you were saying, this idea of with the incident that happened with Ted, where, hey, if there would have just been a record somewhere, particularly with the city, so then, because what the concern is not so much, I don't know if there's a whole lot that could have been done to prevent Ted's situation, which it was, we could have, but then the next situation that happened beyond that, maybe couldn't. So that was kind of the context of that discussion. That may not be one of the things I think that the committee was still waiting on feedback for, was like, does this make sense for city staff to take this on? And we never got really a firm answer one way or the other on that. We kind of got yeah, kind of, maybe. And so, but anyways, point being, something that we can maybe talk about the next one or one after, whenever is the right time to agendize it, but there's a little additional context on that for sure.
No.
Yeah, I agree. We'll bring that back to that.
And it may be worth talking with animal control again, the county, again, to clarify, make sure we understand their comments from before versus maybe where it is now. I don't know. The second actually question I had, this is more just a clarification, not asking for suggesting a change, but just something I was curious about. In section 3 of the animal control services, it kind of, I'm just a little confused as to what subsection D means versus what the last kind of paragraph in there says. So subsection D says enforcement of city ordinances related to animal control, but then after that said the sheriff shall not be required to assume any enforcement function, any enforcement duty or function consistent with those required by the sheriff under the ordinances of the county and the statutes of the state of California. And why I'm very curious about this, and again, if this is the wrong form, we can take it to a different form. Happy to talk about it later.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting about that is the county doesn't have a leash law, and we do. And so I'm not sure how. I mean, Katie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were actually the one that sort of pointed this out. The county doesn't have a leash law, so when they come into town, are they even able to enforce a leash law as it is? No.
So my understanding is that they enforce our municipal code.
Yes.
There is no municipal code of ours to enforce, and they apply the fine.
Yeah, and then to your point, Amber, when it says the sheriff shall not be required to assume any enforcement duty or function inconsistent with those performed by the sheriff, I think what they're trying to say there is like, if we said, we want the person to be shackled if their dog was off leash, that's inconsistent with their methodology, right? I can't think of a good example, but so they won't do anything that's inconsistent with their normal law enforcement duties. So they could arrest somebody, they could ticket somebody, they could do all the things that they normally do, but they can't go any, you know, if we had a crazy city ordinance, for example, then they would say, well, we can't enforce that. Does that make sense?
It does. It doesn't really read that way. That's why I'm a little.
It's
I'm
ugly
still kind of scratching my head a little bit because it feels like their leash law would overcome our leash law, which I'm not advocating for or against or anything like that. Just trying to get my head screwed straight on. So we're thinking that's not the case.
Well, I noticed that too, in both the law enforcement agreement and the animal control.
Yeah.
And I think it really has to do with what they're trying to say is if it's a case where state law preempts local law, then their hands are tied and they can't enforce the local law. I think that's what they're getting at.
It does say ordinances of county.
Because otherwise it wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And I can understand why they would say that we can't enforce a law that's been preempted by state law. So.
Makes better sense than my shackle.
I think it's going to be okay.
Okay. Well, it's just important for how we consider animal advisory, like kind of where we go next with things.
Right.
And what we can, what's even worth discussing, because if it's a moot point on the enforcement side, then it's like, what are we even talking about? So as long as we feel like we've got good coverage on that, then.
Yeah, I
we'll
suppose
keep on the path.
somebody could put that in. We'll go off to get a little clarification on that. But I think that's.
So I mean, that's a great point. Joe, do you think it's worth confirming that with them?
I'll follow up.
Okay.
I believe I did ask this question when I first got here, and I think that they said they would enforce the stricter of the rules.
That's what I.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I would also like to add that Title 7, Chapter 4, Supervisor Madrone has reached out to us, talking about each law specifically. So the county is going to they're going to form an ad hoc committee. I think,
Yes, yeah.
About forming an ad hoc committee to look at leash laws in particular in the county, because it has quite a few complaints and some concerns, and it's been a while since that's been updated. So there might be an opportunity to sit on the ad hoc committee.
Yeah, that would be something good to discuss at the Animal Advisory Committee, to maybe nominate someone to be on that county committee. Yeah.
For sure we'll do that too.
Yeah, that would be great. All right, thank you. Other questions from the public on the animal control agreement? All right, seeing none, I will bring it back to the council. I guess I can make a motion. I will move to approve the contract with animal control and shelter for animal control and shelter services to the city of Trinidad from the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office. And there's a second from Katie. All those in favor? Aye. So that passes unanimously. We have some questions to chase down, but otherwise it looks good. We will skip 5 because we already did that. I don't see any staff activity report, but we did that. We did that earlier. Yeah. So anything else on the agenda that I'm missing? I think we're done. Okay. Future agenda items. I heard the EOP, the emergency operation plan, might be something. I don't know if that needs to be agendized though. That's probably
It's a little ways off.
okay. I was going to add trails. I think at some point, maybe June, July or something. Yeah, we should maybe do a trails update and get the council to weigh in on some strategies around and or maybe nominate for G2Gs with the Yurok tribe and the Rancheria regarding and Taz regarding, well, Taz's meeting regarding, trail openings and closures and things.
Yeah, I think we ought to put on the May agenda, getting Axel Lindgren Memorial Trail reopened like we said we were going to on Memorial Day. But really, I really don't like the idea. It's temporary closures, and then we always run over the
time frame that we, yeah.
I don't think there's any reason for that myself. I think our city staff could have that trail open in a couple of days' work, maybe 3. Not in anything that's going to last forever, but certainly we get through the summer seasons. We take pressure off some of the other trails, which may be becoming more of an issue.
Let's hold the deeper discussion about it for the agenda item, but your recommendation is to put it on the May agenda, Bryce, is that correct?
We should.
Okay. And Joe, I believe you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I will say that staff's having discussions right now. We're trying to meet next week on at least a partial opening. I don't see there's any way to open that trail from top to bottom. Yes, what number agree to that? We
don't need TAS's agreement.
We can open, but.
All right, so I'm gonna.
We'll have it on.
Let's have it on the agenda and have this debate discussion at that time, because I think there's a lot of input that we'll be getting about that.
Do we have a budget?
Did that remind me? We are, yeah. So it's a budget meeting, and so it is pretty full. So talking about trails could be challenging, but to Bryce's point, we did say Memorial Day. Well, we didn't. The former city manager did.
I'm
So,
out of town.
okay. Okay. I apologize. I thought something that reminded me of something, but now I don't.
It's the next step with annexation.
The next step with annexation, so that could be a future agenda. And I think the question is going to be looking at the specific areas that have been outlined by the Planning Commission in the past and determining whether the council wants to move ahead with an annexation recommendation for any of those areas. And that could be just Mill Creek, for example, for water service provisioning. It could be down Patrick's Point Drive, which was another area, I believe. And then there's another one that I don't remember offhand. So I know it's like West Haven and beyond.
I didn't want to separate them like that. I don't understand why the city doesn't vote just the annex, proposed annex.
Because they're the ones that are impacted. But the annexee.
Impacts the city.
True, and at that point, the city residents could come to the council, right? Am I correct, you guys, or?
Yeah, the process is set up by state law, so we don't really have, it's just the way it is. I understand your point, but from the state's perspective, it's logical the way they do it.
Okay.
Because if a group that's contiguous with the city petitions and wants to become part of the city, they don't think the existing resident should be able to say, oh, no, we don't want you guys. We don't want you guys.
Okay, we're getting into it again, so I'm gonna, pause back. But your question is a good one, and I think those will be the next step would be, and time frame wise, I think we're looking at, summer to late summer, maybe early fall. It could be sooner, but just because of everything we have.
Yeah.
That makes
Sure
sense.
you're aware of that.
Okay. All right, I think that is it. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Just since we're adjourned, just, Chair to Mayor, please have that discussion ahead of planning commission.
Oh, yeah.
My ask is gonna be, hoping that.
Yeah.
Later, Jeff. Jeff, I'll talk to you tomorrow.
We're gonna look to know what you guys think. You guys are the farm and young stuff and about the closure, we're not. Approved tonight.
Well done. Yeah.
Still live or?